Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we'll be looking at Constantinople, or in what I like to call it, the impregnable city. So when we often think of sieges in the medieval period, we like to think of cities like Rome or Paris. Now this is mainly due to the fact that we often consider the Papal States or the Kingdom of France to be the typical medieval kingdoms, as of course they were the ones that embraced feudalism the most. However, we also like to think of Jerusalem perhaps being a major part of the Crusades, which was, of course, a major part of the medieval period. However, one city we often like to forget is Constantinople, a city who, after 476 BC AD, which was, of course, when the Western Roman Empire fell, was sieged 25 times, with only a few of those ever being successful. So let's look into it and this great city, and once we've looked at all the sieges, we'll see why it was so hard to take in the first place. So the first siege following 476 and the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, which left the Eastern Roman Empire as a true successor to Rome, was in 626 when the Sassanid Empire, which was essentially the sort of pre-Islam empire, sieged the Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire. Now the Sassanids brought 80,000 troops, estimated, while the Byzantines only had 15,000. Yet, like most of these sieges, the Byzantine Empire won. The next siege was in 654, led by the Rashidun Caliphate, who used 200 ships to try and beat 500 Byzantine ships, and unsurprisingly, they lost. Now, the Rashidun Caliphate was the first sort of major Islamic caliphate following the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Following this was in 699, the Umayyads, who were another Islamic caliphate, sieged Constantinople. However, very little is known of what actually happened, other than the fact that they lost. Now, this is mainly due to the fact that at this period in the Eastern Roman Empire's history, very little in terms of documents survived. So it's going to be very sketchy in terms of numbers and what dates they were and what really happened. So, of course, take this all with a grain of salt. So following this was then the 674 or 678. So again, siege dates are contested, which again pitted the Umayyad Caliphate against the Byzantine Empire. Now they had 200,000 troops versus the 40,000 strong Byzantine garrison, where the Umayyads again lost. Now, in typical Roman fashion, or Eastern Roman fashion in this case, the next siege was a civil war, putting Theodosius III versus Anastasios II, who was the defender. And surprisingly, in this case, Theodosius won. Now, not much is known about the civil war and this part of the battle, other than it happened in 715, where Theodosius won attacking the city, so the first time that Constantinople fell. Now, the Umayyads then again tried to conquer the city in 717 to 718. However, and they had 120,000 troops and 1,800 ships. Now, of course, this is when sieges start to realistically become part of a naval section, and they start to bring naval vessels to help the siege. But the Byzantines had 15,000 troops and 12,000 Bulgars, and they once again won. Then in 813, the Bulgarian Empire attempted to siege the city under Khan Krum, but once again it failed. And sadly, little is known about the Bulgarians at this period under Khan Krum. Now he is called Khan, and that's just due to the fact that different areas in the world had different names for leaders and emperors. So, for example, Kaiser as Germany or King in England. So it's not really to do with the fact that he was anything to do with the Mongols. It's more to do with just the area he was from, and therefore that's his name. Then in 821, Thomas the Slav tried to take the city, but failed. Now, all we know about Thomas the Slav in 821 was this was more of a sort of rebellion than a real military action. This was followed in 860 by the Rus Khanate, where only 5,000 Slav soldiers faced 60,000 Byzantine troops, where they lost. Now, again, dates and sort of numbers aren't really good here. All we really know is that the Rus Khanate was another sort of rebellion. Then in 907, the Rus again tried to take Constantinople with 2,000 ships and lost the battle. The number of Byzantine ships is unknown, sadly. Then there were 3 attacks, each one after the next, by the First Bulgarian Empire on Constantinople. This happened in 913, 921, and 923. And again, very little is known about the sieges other than it was pitting the First Bulgarian Empire versus the Byzantine Empire. There were no numbers recorded or anything. If they were recorded, they were most likely destroyed. Then from 941 to 944, the Rus attempted to siege Constantinople with 40,000 men and 1,000 ships. But the Byzantines had only a fleet of 15 ships, but they did have Greek fire, like, as I mentioned in the previous video, was a sort of form of napalm, ancient napalm. Now, this 941 to 944 siege was a prolonged siege, so that's why the dates are so long. Another siege was then the 1047 siege, which was a civil war again, when Leo Tornikos attempted to besiege the city but failed. This was followed by the 1203 siege and the 1204 sack of the city, which I've covered in another video, by the Crusaders, which of course were successful. Then in 1235, the Empire of Nicaea, which was the remaining part of the Byzantine Empire that wasn't destroyed by the Crusaders, attempted to take back Constantinople from the Latin Empire, which was the puppet Byzantine Empire, but failed to take the city back. Numbers again are unknown. It did happen again in 1260, where the Empire of Nicaea attempted to take the city back, but again, troop numbers are unknown, but they did win in this time, resulting in the Byzantine Empire being reformed. Then, in 1376, Andronicus IV sieged the city and won, but there is very little evidence of what happened other than the fact that it was a civil war. Then, finally, we get to the sort of end periods of Constantinople, and this is sadly the Ottoman Empire. Now, in 1391, the Ottoman Empire began their first siege of the city and failed to take it. Now, this would sort of spark the historic Ottoman-Byzantine rivalry, which would essentially result in the Ottomans attempting to take the city as much as possible. They then attacked in 1394, 1411, 1422, and then finally in 1453, where they historically won due to the fact they had cannons and the Byzantine Empire was weak. Now, it was under Constantine XI, and it was also under Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire. But why was Constantinople so hard to take? I mean, after all, no city can be besieged 25 times and, survive that, surely. Well, they did. So what was it? Well, first of all, Constantinople was surrounded by three sides by water. Now, this is, of course, the entrance to the Black Sea. But in order to get to that water that was surrounding Constantinople, we had to pass the Golden Horn. Now, this was important because the Golden Horn was defended by a chain. Now, this chain was quite important as it essentially went across the bay and could be raised when ships were attacking to prevent them from entering, and lowered when ships needed to enter. Now, of course, the chain didn't just obviously be the reason that those ships were held off, as it was possible for ships to go over it, but, it was an extra defence layer that could slow down the ships to allow land troops to deal with them. The main defence, however, was the walls of Constantinople. Now, these walls were first built in 658 BC, when the city was founded, but those were, typical small wooden walls, nothing really that would be useful. Following this are multiple wars and sieges before 476, which I hadn't covered in this video, I could do in another video. And of course, those walls were built up each time. However, it was only when Constantine the Great took the city, and he began to rebuild it, and from 1324 the city had new walls. Now, these are known as the Constantine walls. Now, these walls were good, but, still not good enough, really. So following this, Theodosian II then began to build new walls. Now, these were known as the Theodosian walls. Now, the walls are estimated to have been finished in 413 AD, however, again, not really much is known. Now, these walls were essentially impregnable, and these were the main walls used in all these sieges, as they had a triple-layered defence, essentially meaning there were three main walls, each one going higher and thicker than the last one. And that was allowing a basically in-depth defence. Now, of course, these walls were again modified, so a moat system was then put in front of the first wall, more towers. The other problem was there were, of course, many earthquakes which damaged these towers and walls. So why did the city finally fall in 1453? I mean, after all, 24 sieges before it, basically all were unsuccessful, and it was all due to these walls. Well, first of all, these walls were aging. I mean, there had been so many earthquakes and floods that many of the towers and walls had basically fallen into disrepair and were damaged, which, of course, the Byzantine Empire couldn't really afford to repair. The second thing was that the Ottomans had cannons, something that was very new to Europe, so, that did kind of make a difference. When, of course, your walls are made of stone and all of a sudden the Ottomans are flinging massive rocks at you, it makes your walls slightly less effective. But it's mainly just due to the fact that the Byzantine Empire was bankrupt. It was so small at this point, and essentially out of money, it just couldn't afford to defend itself anymore. Thank you all for watching.